All right, everybody, good morning. 1 minute from noon here in the Baltics, Riga time. That means 11 a.m. France, Germany, 10 a.m. UK. 1 hour behind my planned starting time, but here we go. Hope everybody is having a good week. A lot I want to cover today, both political and economic. And I'm finally getting to a point where I'm really starting to scale what I have, which is exciting. I do want to talk about it in the context of the SaaS apocalypse that I'm hearing the rumbles of in this AI world, when people are actually realizing how powerful AI can be. So here's my research again on the good old monetary base. Let's just look at how big it is. All right, $27 trillion. $27 trillion. And still, the free world is holding. We've got the global south here in gray, basically the rest of the world, 22.5 trillion. Russia has 300 and some billion dollars frozen in reserves, which back this monetary base that you're seeing there of $342 billion equivalent. Hong Kong's pretty big, unfortunately more or less captured. Taiwan is about the same size as Hong Kong, a little bit smaller. Ukraine is 10 times smaller than both. South Korea, Australia, about the same size as Hong Kong, Taiwan. Then you see Switzerland, one of the mid-majors. And then Japan, NATO non-US, which includes the UK and the United States. I continue to wonder if the United States will remain blue on this chart, but that's what it is. And so as you go through a lot of the outrage on Twitter or whatever, this is the actual split. China was its largest share of the pie all the way back here. Now, of course, this is just, there's inflated dollars, inflated euros that keep getting produced, and China's going to print just as much as anybody else. But this is the giant pool of money that represents, what states are actually capable of. All right, so if we look at this one now, which is military spend. $2.7 trillion is spent worldwide on militaries each year. No doubt that's going to be at least 300 billion higher last year, 2025 year end. This is 2024, so at least 3 trillion. Let's look at this one now as a percentage. All right, so very similar. Here's the monetary base. Here's military spend. I do not have Soviet Union data in here, so Russia only starts basically in the 90s. And here we can see Russia's much bigger portion of the pie. All right, 5%, 5.6% of the world. China's actually smaller, 11.8%. Ukraine is way out punching their weight, 2.4%. Taiwan 0.6%, South Korea 1.8%, Australia 1.3%, Switzerland 0.3%, Japan, non-US NATO, which includes Britain again, and the US. And here, of course, the rest of the world is actually larger. Okay, where we're only 10% rest of world in money terms. In military terms, Global South bigger. US also bigger by quite a large margin, right? 21% of the pie here as far as money goes, 37% of the pie here as far as military spend goes. Let's look at GDP. All right. It's a jaggedy, just annual GDP here. It's World Bank figures plus Taiwan, because World Bank doesn't report on Taiwan. It's all political. $110 trillion, according to the World Bank, summing up all the global individual nations here in 2024. United States, 28 trillion. Non-US NATO, 26 trillion. Japan, 4. Australia, Korea, 2. Taiwan, a little bit less than 1. Ukraine, 200 billion. Half of their economy is fully militarized. China, Russia, Iran. I'll have to check why Hong Kong isn't here. Maybe the World Bank doesn't do it. I'll have to do it from IMF, because we could get their GDP on here as well. Let's look at this as a percentage. All right. The good thing about the horrible war that Ukrainians are facing from a Russian invader is that it's becoming more autonomously fought with drones. Russia is still stubbornly, is the best word you can use, throwing men. The latest quote is 29-1 Russian soldiers being killed relative to Ukrainians as they try to invade another's territory. But yeah, I think there's no question. You just look at these levels, right? I mean, as much as I love Bitcoin and trying to get the average person to use it, stuff's not going to stop. You can see the last year of peace in Europe right here. Right here, in fact. All right. But as a percentage, again, interestingly, China's, with these big macro numbers, I know it's hard to project anything, right? You would think that with Russia having 2% of the world's GDP, $2 trillion GDP, whatever, and way outproducing and outspending Ukraine in the military, you'd think that they would have easily won. The Sputnik moment, as a bunch of the Vatniks said in February 2022, 4 years ago. So that didn't happen. But of course, it's at a great cost for all Ukrainians. They're going to keep coming. I want to roll through, I'll come back to Bitcoin, but just want to roll through some political things that I've been looking at. This is Igor Gherkin, or one of his call signs was it Strelkov, which is a rifleman. He's in the KGB, FSB, one of the main instigators of the Russian independent regions of Ukraine, which seceded in 2014. Here he is on tape in May. All right, a lot of the action was in the spring, saying that not even 1,000 people can be found in the entire region who are willing to fight for Russia. He said many damning things for the apparently liberal, anarchic movements of the Russian rebels in Ukraine, and this is just one of them. Here's Senator Rubio 6 years ago saying how lamenting how Orban's Hungary democracy has significantly eroded and how concerned the U.S. is about its links to Moscow. The same Hungary Rubio yesterday or 2 days ago claimed it was in its golden age of relationship between the United States and Hungary. Very sad to see this little Marco talking this way, but that's what he's doing. Again, just to remind you, the Christian bastion of traditional values residing in Russia. People are finally maybe standing up over, the cross of church and state. We'll see. The Russian Orthodox Church has long been captured by the FSB. Actually doing a military-style performance in church. It's a good point by Vice Grad talking about the 2012 case of the Pussy Riot members. They were precisely talking about this, how the Russian Orthodox Church was being weaponized by the state. If you don't see this, then I got a bridge to sell you. So here's Bill Browder talking about how many deaths that occurred in the UK probably could be reinvestigated in light of the Navalny revelations. And then this is important by Kasparov, right? It's important, right, that you're finally acknowledging these things, that Russia doesn't care about any rules. They will murder you on your own soil with very exotic toxins or polonium. I've been living in Europe for 20 years, and I remember very well when Litvinenko was killed in 2006. It's fine to have Putin's murderous nature back in the news, but it should never leave. How many Ukrainian children has Russia murdered in their beds in the 2 years since Putin and Navalny had Navalny killed? Here's a good one from Ann Applebaum. All right. This is going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in April in the Hungarian elections. But nothing is a guarantee. Even though apparently Orban is at least finally popularly at his end. Hello, Ghost in the 90s. Let me come back to that question on the power law. I will. Just a couple more political ones. So I'll just read this. You guys can definitely check it out yourself. But I saw many reports of this. All right. So this is wild. The Ukrainians did not publish this, and this was not done on Ukrainian territory as far as I know. I'm not sure where this guy is. But so Russian Z-bloggers published a video by Denis Kolesnikov, junior sergeant of 1435 Regiment of the Russian Army. He described the scale of crimes and lawlessness in the SMO zone, that is this special military operations zone. Of course, it's not a war. It's a crime to call it a war in Russia. According to Kolesnikov, the Russian army has turned into a giant gang where soldiers are executed, arms trafficking, and extortion are massive. Here are some quotes from the video. Over half our squad, about 50 people, were executed by commanders. Personnel is being executed, weapons are taken away. Everyone must pay money to commanders. If someone doesn't pay, he's not needed. He's brought to the front lines and killed. I've personally witnessed several people killed. When we line up, that is by their own side, he's saying. When we line up, everyone is told how much they owe. Each person was told to pay from 1 to 3 million rubles. Divide that by 100 roughly for, regular fiat money, which is not that good anyway. This is the price not to go to the contact line. As soon as money runs out, they get sent there or killed. Weapons are constantly taken away from the front line. I don't know where they are taken and why. They wanted to execute me, demanded 3 million rubles, took me to the city of Rostov. I went to the ATM and ran away. If Russians do this to their own soldiers, this is Anton speaking, just imagine what they do to prisoners of war and people in occupied Ukrainian territories. Here's another recent defector, a drone operator. I'm not going to read all this. You can watch the video. But apparently it was an elite unit, defected to the Ukrainian side, says that after being deployed near Kupiansk and seeing how casually orders were given to execute prisoners, he went AWOL and crossed over to the Ukrainian side. These stories are increasing, not decreasing. And then this is just wild. Ukrainians have been calling it a cleanup operation, not really a counteroffensive, but the maps are becoming more clear, let's say. So at least 200 square kilometers taken in the last week. Fastest battlefield gains for Ukraine since June 2023. It's obviously just a hellhole there, no doubt. The front line, the contact line is extremely dangerous for either side. But having Ukraine recapture some of their territory in this environment where you can just get picked off immediately if you go into this gray zone is great. Really, really great to see. Same thing. A lot of good moves for Ukraine here this year. But in the interest of trying to get, we'll go back to Bitcoin in a second. In the interest of trying to provide more, hard facts to you guys and show them in sort of a global, sort of macro way, I've been thinking about how incredible this AI stuff has been for me, right? Like I've been able to do things here that I've wanted to do for 10 years, and it was too expensive having a coder do it for me. I mean, it's just incredible how much you can do, and hopefully I can bring it to you guys and maybe even maybe make a little margin on this. We'll see. But I just want to compare. I mean, just so many things. Look, I'm logged into my Bloomberg here, and I don't have like a full Bloomberg. I just have a subscription to the news, right? Ads everywhere. It just makes it an annoying experience. They do have some good charts that are unique to Bloomberg, whatever. But this headline is something that I think is very poignant relative to today. Basically, all the private credit that is wrapped around software debt. All right, they're calling it the SaaS apocalypse. And where's the number? Let's forget the charts for a second. But why am I? There we go. So apparently, it's $3.5 trillion. Which could amount to 275 billion in losses, is the estimate. Just have to see. But I can actually speak to it from what I do. I just try to, before getting back to some Bitcoin stuff, just try to give a much simpler view of a lot of the complicated stuff that a multi-billion-dollar company such as Bloomberg even can bring. And of course, the story in here is ironic because I'm sure Bloomberg has plenty of software debt too. But with a few months worth of coding and a pretty detailed database, some kind of what's the word, like personal proprietary, but most just open data. Like here's the World Bank. I don't have the sources listed yet, but it's incredible. It's just incredible what how we can look at this stuff. So I'm very intrigued to see how this idea continues, because if the mortgage-backed security bust was a couple $1 trillion back in 2008, we're at least looking at that much right now just for software debt alone. I know a lot of people think AI itself is a bubble, but I would more be worried about here, like how much debt is behind companies that simply can be completely outcompeted with AI, primarily, software and just basic coding services. It's unbelievable. Is the old power curve? Nothing really changed. I do need to keep tweaking this where I can never seem to get right on today's date. There we go. There's my model for you. 68,000 roughly Bitcoin price. Still in the 5th percentile quantile. The lowest, right, relative to the power trend, which is 96% R squared, is $62,000 Bitcoin. So we're extremely low here on the quantile. And it's 81% pseudo R squared. Okay, so all these lines, unlike my other multiple analysis, which is more jagged lines, right? This is nice smooth lines, but they're arguably, well, it just depends. You gotta look at all the data, but arguably this is more scientific than the multiple analysis that I show you often. And God, this is annoying. This is one thing I got to keep fixing here. There it is, 2018. Still deeply discounted, 45%, close to 50%, basically, from the OLS line itself. But this 0 percentile line here, which is 62K, right, that's an 81% pseudo R squared. Right? And by the way, these CAGRs are helpful. Okay, so let's just look, say, from, say you bought at the start of the ETF boom for Bitcoin, the start of 2024. Here are your CAGRs. Okay, actual, that means just a cherry-picked price, start price, which was like down here, to now. Or what is perhaps more scientific, more helpful, is the CAGRs at each level. Now, of course, some of these can just completely go away, like the 100th, the 90th, right? But it's possible to achieve a CAGR like this with many of these other percentiles if you've, roughly caught the price around here. Of course, it's going to be lower now because of the actual is so much lower, but this is, again, where you got to back up and just look at the bigger picture, because I'm 99% sure we're going to get back to these levels because we're in the 5th percentile quantile. So the OLS itself, 43%, 43.3% during this time. The evolving multiple, 40.6. It's basically the same thing. It's not a big deal. The 0th actually grew the fastest at 50th percentile, but obviously no one was catching that price down here. And then let's look at the median, which is here, 44.5% CAGR. Now, the thing to note, as this is a power curve, is those CAGRs are going to decline slightly, right? So that's fine. It's just important to understand. So let's go and look at the CAGRs, say, from, let's just look at this. Let's look entirely for this year. So roughly here to roughly here. All right, looking at the CAGR from the end of last year till, this is too long, so let me go here. There we go. All right. This is what we're projected for this year. Now, of course, you're only going to really get whatever this line is, the green line. But even if we, stay down here at some level, or let's say the 40th percentile, which is here, 0, 10, 20, 30, no, the 30th percentile, which is where we started. Let's look at the 30th percentile, right there, 40.7% CAGR. That's if we get back to the actual line, which is here by the end of the year, which is, in raw terms, 125K. Maybe too aggressive, maybe even too aggressive for this year, but these are the types of numbers that Bitcoin is painting on a trend. Now, look, actually, I'm not quite sure if that's from this time or it's projected to the end of the year. Obviously, it all comes down to what this value is. I could actually run that. I need to test that myself right now. Yeah, it is. So this is just the actual. Of course, Bitcoin has had a brutal couple months, but that's par for the course for what Bitcoin can do during this cyclical moves. And I still think that we're now showing even stronger evidence that 4-year cycle is right on track. Finally, to your question, ghosts in the 90s, so low. Yeah, so people are saying it's becoming a power law. I can maybe even pull it up and we can look at it. But it seemed that, see, this is the wild thing. If someone, an entity like MSTR becomes a power law, it's an interesting question for the market as a whole. So let me show you. Let's look at, say, Apple. All right, so here's Apple. It's clearly exponential. All right, picked from a very friendly global financial crisis bottom, and it's gangbuster performance. Not as good as Bitcoin, but still gangbuster, right? 25 to 30% CAGRs. Incredible, incredible, incredible investment, no doubt. How this will continue, we will see. But let's now look at MSTR. And I think I'm going to have to build this really quick on a power because I don't have it. But like I said, I'm getting more scalable here. So let's see. Let's go power on the visible range. Okay. All right, hold on. Okay, so most stocks, all stocks, are exponential. Okay, I'm going to try to, let me see if this works. No, that doesn't seem, okay, there we go. So here I have MSTR. Why is that not working? Sorry, 1 second. All right, here I have MSTR drawn as a power law over a long time. And you can see it looks weird, right? It's not a power law. That would be an exponential trend, clearly, but I can't switch back and forth easily. Maybe I need to do that soon, but it's not great. 12.5% R squared. Let's now redo it, the zoom, which should change the power law. It's going to take a second to up. There we go. Okay. So this is a power law drawn from 2020, which is about when Saylor started to announce. And it's much better. All right, 63%. See that? 63% R squared. It fits it better. You can kind of see the Bitcoin price moving here and down and up again and down. It fits it better. But let me now show you how this thing looks on Exponential. All right, so here's MSTR over the long-term exponential log scale. There you go. Looks better, right, by the way, than the original chart I showed you on power. Still not great, but this is the best. It's always going to be exponential for stocks, for bonds too, and the markets. 40.7% CAGR. Now let's go from here to do a direct comparison. And it should resize a little bit. Yep, there it went resized to this exact view, doing a power curve, and we're at, oh, interesting. Not a power curve, exponential. And this might actually still be power because in the background now, It is exponential. It's about the same. I might have to double check this, but it's about the same. It's exponential. R squared about the same as power, which is here. But theoretically, I would say yes. I would say yes to your question. It will be a power law over time as Bitcoin becomes adopted. The question for how interest payments work in the broader market, though, is wild if you think about all this. And I'm not, again, I have different theories, but I'm not sure how it all works out. My general thesis is the more free and open the world is and Bitcoin is used, then everything will kind of trend towards a power law like Bitcoin. If we still have, massive wars and Bitcoin regulation and you can't withdraw from exchanges and it's a highly controlled asset, and as Nick Carter says or wants to do, you have BlackRock doing Bitcoin development, then it will lose its power law status, both Bitcoin and MSTR. That's my general thesis at the moment. Hello, Oscar. Good morning to you. So, yeah, that is generally the idea there. I'll show you good old silver. Who thinks it's going back up? We'll certainly have that dead cat bounce, but I think it's it. There will be a dead cat bounce higher than this one for sure. But if you look here, all the way back to 1980, you never got back to the high. It's the way markets work, even here. Sorry. When you put in that top and then you have all the hopium, somehow silver is going to change the world. It's not how it works. Exponential asset. A very volatile, crazy exponential asset, but exponential nonetheless. Only 57.4% CAGR, or sorry, R squared, not great. 3.8% CAGR. Here's a good example, by the way. This is a good example of why I love showing you guys the trend lines. Like, you could cherry pick silver just like you can cherry pick gold. Say, oh, it was only, $1, $2 an ounce back here, right? $1.60 back in 1970. I'm sorry, sometimes it started as 1971, 1970, it doesn't matter, whatever. And then you say, okay, now it's worth 70 today. Well, look, that's an 18.8% CAGR. There's very few people in the world that have gotten that CAGR like that. I'm sure there's some old gold bugs, silver bugs that have done it. Hung on to some junk silver from the 60s. But there's very few people that are doing that. Generally, you got to go on the averages, go on the correlations, go on the trends. And so that's what this black line is for. And, it's a crazy asset to cut your teeth on. I mean, great if you bought, say, here. Even fine if you bought here now at these prices. But it never goes up to the level that you want it to be and then just hangs around, just like Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is even less volatile, I would argue, than this. And bottom line, the CAGR is not 18.8%. That would be connecting the dots, this to this. The actual CAGR is 3.8%. 3.8% is the overall return of silver over 55 years, 56 years. Sure, you could have gotten better than that if you bought here. You would have been worse than that if you bought here, or about the same, let's say, because we are at all-time highs. But so that's how I'm trying to look at these things. And then if you look at the, where's the Bitcoin? There we go. The deviations from the trend, another sign here that I think we're super, super cheap for Bitcoin. No problems, just super, super cheap. Okay. But if we compare that with gold and silver, let's stick with silver because it's a more extreme version. One second. Yes, it is. The power curve of Bitcoin is $100 a day, even more. I'll show you in a second. But look at that. People talk about volatility. Here's the exponential deviation of silver and the power deviation of Bitcoin. So yeah, in the early years, Bitcoin did have some crazy rises. But we are just ironing out that volatility. The real thing to look at is this 30-day. Can get down close to zero. Now, of course, these are still bad moves, or depending on how you look at it, good if you're ready to invest for the long term. But this volatility is way less than the 30-day volatility back in the day. And this is volatility from trend, not volatility of itself, like the percent change, but volatility from trend. All right, and then, so that's Bitcoin. Now let's look at silver. Notice the spikes. When they come, they're hot and heavy. But silver is actually arguably a more volatile asset. The way that it moves around its exponential trend line, it can still get up to 40, 50% volatility compared to what Bitcoin does and has done on the 30-day volatility around the power trend. So again, all these are just super bullish things to me. Amazing. Yep. Thank you, Oscar. Yeah, Wall Street loves volatility, as they say. They take the other side of the fear trade. I gotta load up my other old chart to show you the daily changes. I showed it yesterday. It's coming. This is amazing though. If you think about like, look, all these charts, all this this methodology, and you know, by all means, if you are into it, Claude Code is the one I've been using. Helped me a lot. But think about all of the ridiculous amounts of debt that have been put on software companies to do things that any one of us can make now in a matter of months, like to a modular sort of scalable degree. It's crazy. So we'll see. For my own personal use and for you guys, I'm hoping to get something with, you know, no ads, no ridiculous sort of interface, just very, very simple and clean. This is interesting about, you know, sometimes Bloomberg comes up with interesting ratios. So this is the debt service coverage ratio. This actually looks like cash coverage, which is a balance sheet item, not revenue coverage. But the point is the lower number is worse. So if you have something close to 1, you can't cover your interest payment, basically. Or if you were below 1, then you wouldn't be covering your interest payment. So they're very close, very thin here. Although it's getting better, to be fair. This is 2023, 2025. But it's much lower than all sectors and also the hospitality space. Hello, Casa Murphy. Very true. All right, coming back to the growth of the trends on the curve. I showed this yesterday, but just to compare. So at the moment, we're growing $120 a day. Of course, price is way under. It's not doing that. Price is not. Actual is here. And negatives, by the way, aren't shown. So let's take out the noise. So actual can go up, you know, in May 6th of last year, it went up $1,800 a day. Then if you see a blank, that means it's negative because it's a log scale. In any event, let me even take that off just to leave it. So of course, the real thing is volatile. It is, you know, doesn't do what the beautiful number 1 says, but we're going up $120 a day. And by the end of the year, we'll be going up $150 a day, which translates into $50,000 a year. I'm telling you, the market doesn't understand this. They're not seeing it. They're not thinking about it. Maybe Wall Street understands some way to swing, you know, volatility of the power curve, but the stability of this is not changing. And again, Bitcoin's deviations from the power curve over a 30-day period, you know, they can get as low as 1%, 2%, with the spikes being, okay, 10%, 11%, 12%. Compare that to silver. That's a 46% 30-day spike back in 2011. And right now, we're coming down from 50%. Bullish. That's what I'm saying, man. They do not understand it. You know, this is the bottom line. What I'm most curious about is This is such a obvious statement, but I'm most curious about the future. I'm most curious about the next year, because just think back. How many people said it's over? 4-year cycles are over. Bitcoin's on a new plateau. It's just following the 4-year cycle. To remind you, these are the base case levels. Hourly that's a good point. I should put that on there. That's a very good point. That's a great point. I mean, $100, that's like average wage in Russia. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that, but not much. I want to build. Did I do this yet? Hold on. I'm going to put Bitcoin in terms of silver, because that is an interesting one that we've been talking about for a while. But I haven't shown the quantile regression, which is always harder for me to make without this new software, which I have now. So let me see if I can do it. Why is that not configured? All right, I can't do it yet. Tomorrow I'll have it. I will show you in Euro, since we're in Europe here. Okay. Here we go. All right, here's Euro, Bitcoin Euro on the power. Bitcoin, silver, and gold coming tomorrow with the actual quantile model that, same deal. Interesting, this did not hit the low here, but it does, or it did back in January. Or was that start of February even? Yeah, start of February. Super cheap in terms of euros. Can this go lower? Yes. Do I think it's likely? No. I need to write down a list of having more ideas as I talk to you guys as I record. What else do you guys want to see? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. This is just wild. I mean, they thought they were going to break Ukraine, and so far it seems like they're going to have to break their own populations. By the way, I must be getting throttled talking about the war. Like I was not talking about the war for a while, and there were more views, and now I'm getting like 26 views. Not that I'm that popular, but it's very interesting. Sorry. Russia riots, Telegram. So this happened a couple days ago. You guys might have seen this. They were actually put a lock on the front doors of Roskomnadzor, as Jay says, the North Korean style internet filter. They're really going crazy over this. I mean, the whole population is freaking out. Do you have any other links? I mean, they're going so close to full fascism. Like he's almost there. Like it's so far he has kept the Moscow and St. Petersburg populations content. Basically, you don't talk out, you don't speak out, you get your telegram, you get your little salary, you don't speak out, no politics, no nothing. War continues, and you don't speak out. But once you start to take away so much normalcy from a society, if you want to continue your war, you have to go full blown fascism at some point. MAGA has a trouble with free speech these days. Putin is prosecuting in absentia a German carnival float builder, Jacques Tilly. Nice name for a German float builder. Very European. For making parade floats, making fun of him. Anyone in MAGA want to speak up for the float builders' free speech rights being violated by Russia? It's just madness, guys. It's madness. That's about all I had for the charts. Let me know if you guys want to look at anything else. It's very weird, though. I don't know if I'm getting throttled or what. 26 on Twitter. Usually I'm like at least a couple hundred, 400, like these other guys. Or I'm just not interested in it. People aren't interested anymore. That's also possible. Have not watched it. The only thing I'll say about Booth, though, he's a purist, right? And I imagine he's talking about how everything's going to collapse eventually. I don't actually agree with that. Not that I don't want a Bitcoin world where everybody has peace and harmony and everything, but it's going to get darker before it gets brighter, unfortunately. If the U.S. could actually choose a right side, maybe that would be better. But, this is exponential growth, right? Straight line on log scale. Looks weird on log, but let's see if I zoom it in. Looks a little bit better. Got to work on that zoom. There we go. That's better. It's just how it is. You don't need any statistics to look at this and see that military spend is going to be $3 trillion next year, 4, maybe in a couple years. No matter what Trump says in these meetings in Geneva, and he's clearly showing now, I mean, it's how obvious has it been that he's been on the side of Putin. Ukrainians do not believe that Russians will stop bombing them every night. They're getting more resilient in stopping the attacks, thank God, but they're defending their country. They can't stop defending. They're willing to have a ceasefire. They're willing for all those things, but it's just wild. So yeah, I haven't seen Booth's interview there, but I'm sure there will be some interesting nuggets for sure. But exponential growth doesn't just stop. It's volatile. It's like this. This is a good example of volatile exponential growth. Compared to Bitcoin's nice power growth, becomes less volatile. Let's look at Apple, by the way. I haven't done deviation of Apple. Hold on. Let's start it at the global financial crisis, as always, to give it the best deviation possible. Okay, apply to the left. All right, it's coming. Here's another. Here's Apple compared to its deviation. Better than gold and silver. And this is only looking from 2008. So again, the 30 days is the smooth one. Although, look at that. Even you could argue at times. This is really interesting. This is a really interesting chart, if you ask me. All right. This is a blue chip stock. Maybe less than 1% of the shares of Apple trade every day, compared to Bitcoin, where 2% at least of the coins trade every day, spot, at least. I got to get a chart of that to show you. Apple can have plenty of days where it's deviating 6, 7, 8% from the trend. Bitcoin, zoom in. Let's zoom in. Now, similar. In truth, it's similar. It's similar, but much better than silver, right? Bitcoin, Apple. Volatile time for Apple would be 15% standard deviation over 30 days. Bitcoin, 40%. But, on average, they look very similar. Sorry. Apple, Bitcoin. Apple, Bitcoin. Okay, that's good. Definitely check it out. UK politics is another very interesting thing. Peter's a good guy. I like him, and I got to get back to Bedford. They had a rough month, the team, like a month ago, or it didn't seem like they were on track, but I think they're getting close where they can maybe still win the league, which would be a record 4 years in a row, I guess. And regardless of the football stuff, Peter is just doing great stuff for the town. Bitcoin Bedford. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, they're very close. They were much lower here from winning the league like a month ago. And now, much, much closer. I think the games go into April, so I'm sure they got a chance. What's going on here, guys? Am I getting throttled, or does my content just suck now? Any other charts? Any other charts? This is not stopping, all right? Okay. Here's central bank money. Come on. And log scale. All right, it's a straight line. It's going to keep growing. On linear scale, you can see it, of course, better. Well, let's just take it off because the printers are coming out. That's right. What is interesting, though, is they still they had a rough go of it in the 90s. Let me change the... Let's go back to 1997. Update. So here's back to 97. Actually, let me do 95 because that's do 1994. That was the before the web was released, right? Berners-Lee released it in 95 or bootstrapped it. Here's Apple. Still, pretty remarkable CAGR, 30%, 96% R squared. If you trust this trend, it's pretty cheap. Liberation Day was actually the best buy. If you trust this trend over the long term. Thank you, Oscar. Appreciate it. As always, thanks for the engagement. Have a great day as well. I'm reaching my max as well in the videos or the charts for today, guys, but just wanted to point this out because it's going to get really interesting, in my opinion, with all this AI, genuine progress, but also genuine costs for other people. There's a paid Bloomberg subscription. I got this ad, all these ads. I'm going to try to bring you guys something better for a hell of a lot cheaper than a Bloomberg News subscription. Please like, subscribe if you can. Stop the throttle that I might be facing for my pro-Bitcoin, pro-Ukraine statements in this free speech world, censorship world that we're fighting. You can support me here, my website. A lot of the information is there as well. And yeah, good stuff coming. Just got to get the bugs worked out, and then I'll let you guys know. Thank you, Casa. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Talk to you tomorrow.